Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and we have another amazing show planned out for today. Hope everyone's week was good and everyone is ready to sit back and relax this weekend, as we are finally approaching the playoffs in baseball, which will be a big topic of conversation today on the show. And like I mentioned, we have a lot going on today, some recaps, we've got playoff previews, and a whole lot of other really good stuff, so I'll dive right into it. And first, I will get things started with game recaps from Tuesday, September 22nd, some really good games that are potentially going to dictate the end of the season and how certain teams finish out the year. After our first segment, I will jump into a little sneak preview at the playoffs this year, and with more teams starting to punch their ticket, the playoff picture is starting to shore itself up a little bit more each and every day. I will take a look at the potential and the actual matchups that will happen in the first round, make some comments on them, mention which teams I think are sleepers, make some predictions, and a lot more. And later on, I'll share which players I think are players to keep an eye on going into the playoffs, which players are going to be difference makers for their squads, and whether or not they have any momentum riding into the playoffs. And to wrap up the show, I will discuss the impact that technology has had so far on the game of baseball and the impact that it will continue to have on the sport in the future. There will be a lot of changes I feel that could occur in baseball in the next few years with the impact of technology. It'll be intriguing to see if there will be any drastic changes made due to the role of technology, so be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the show for that conversation. But I want to get into some recaps from Tuesday, September 22nd, a really good slate of games, a lot of things going on, some teams actually starting to make more of a case for themselves in the playoffs, and some teams starting to fall out of the race. So I'll get right into it. First game, Brewers-Reds. Brewers winning this one 3-2, and this was a huge needed win for Milwaukee, especially over the Reds. Them and the Reds are going back and forth right now in the wild card, jockeying for position. Actually, that win now just kicked the Phillies out of the 8th spot of the playoffs, and the Brewers, as of today, of recording Wednesday, September 23rd, they hold that 8th spot in the playoffs. So again, that is very subject to change. We've got the final game. I believe it's coming up on Sunday. So again, things are going to be, rapidly approaching for the playoffs, and this is a huge win for the Brewers. Cincinnati jumped out ahead first, though, scoring the first 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the 2nd, and then Milwaukee scored 1 in the top of the 5th and 2 in the top of the 7th. Eric Sogard had a go-ahead double in that top 7 inning. Nick Castellanos, though, led things off in the first inning for the Reds with a 2-run home run. He's going to be vital for this Reds team. I mean, they're sitting at an even 28-28. Brewers are 27-27, and right now they're in that 7th spot in the playoffs currently, and if they want to make any sort of noise, which I do believe they could. I mean, they are arguably one of the hottest teams in baseball right now. If they want to make any sort of a move in the playoffs, they're going to really need to rely on the bat of Nick Castellanos, Mike Moustakas, Jesse Winker, Eugenio Suarez. These guys that are usual, typical big power hitters in their lineup, they're going to have to play the best baseball they have played the entire year. Jesse Winker's average has started to drop significantly, but Castellanos has been playing much better as of recently, and it's good that they've got Moustakas back in the lineup after, having him in and out of the lineup for a good portion of the season because of injuries. But again, the Brewers doing a really nice job of winning games that they need to win. So next game, it was actually a doubleheader between the Phillies and the Nationals. First of the 2 games, Nationals winning 5-1. Washington scored the first run in the bottom of the first and then tacked on 4 more in the bottom of the third. Phillies were only able to put on 1 run in the top of the 4th. Gene Segura had a solo home run for the Phillies in that top 4th inning. So again, really good sign that, the Phillies do have some life still. Gene Segura is still producing. JT Realmuto's been having a very, very good year. They've got guys that are still producing at a high level, but can they put it together at the right time? Can they play, the best type of baseball that they've played all year long? at the most pivotal point of the season, the last week of the season, last 7 games of the season. Once this comes out on Saturday, it'll pretty much be the final weekend of baseball. So, it's do or die time right now for the Phillies. Trey Turner had a huge RBI double for the Nationals. Really, really good job by Austin Voth. He actually threw a complete game, only 7 innings, but he threw a complete game for the Nationals. He got his first win of the year, 1-5, 6.25 ERA, while Austin Nola moves to 5-4 for the Phillies, 3.06 ERA for him. He's been pitching, pretty solid all year long, I would have to say. I mean, again, not lights out like the usual Nola that we've seen in the past, but he's still, right around that 3 ERA mark, right where he needs to be. And then the second of the 2 games, the Nationals again winning 8-7 in a little bit of a closer one, actually wound up going into 8 innings instead of 7. Philly scored the first 2 runs of the game in the top of the second, and then Washington scored 4 in the bottom of the third and 2 in the bottom of the fourth. So going into the 5th inning, it's a 6-3 ball game after the Phillies tacked on 1 run in the top of the 4th, and then the Philadelphia Phillies went on a tear the next couple innings, scoring 2 in the 5th, 1 in the 6th, and then scoring 1 really needed run in the 8th. But it was a Yadiel Hernandez's walk-off home run for the Washington Nationals that was able to carry them into the sweep of the doubleheader. Nationals are way out of the playoff picture. I mean, they're 23-32, have absolutely no chance. Right now, they're just one of these teams that they know that they're not going to make it, so, they say, why not, let's just spoil some teams' playoff hopes. And that right there, that's what they're doing. I mean, 2 needed wins over the Phillies, and, the Brewers winning, that has now, put the Phillies 2 spots below the 8th wild card spot right now, so that has really set them back a little bit. But again, the Brewers need to continue to win, and the Phillies need to keep losing if the Brewers want to hold on to any sort of playoff hope. Moving into the next game, a final in 10 innings, White Sox-Indians, and this was actually a great game. I was watching the Dodgers-Athletics game the other evening, and, they flashed over to the White Sox-Indians game. They showed the walk-off home run, huge come-from-behind victory for the Indians. Really, really big hit out of, I believe it's Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez hit the walk-off home run for the Indians, and that actually sent them into the playoffs. So they clinched the playoffs on Tuesday. They were able to, go in dramatic fashion, which is always a great sign. And, hey, people forget this Indians team is not that far removed from a World Series run a couple years ago. So they're still the same very good, talented, Indians team of 2016. Guys like Jose Ramirez, who's been hitting unbelievable all year long. I mean, he's leading the team in home runs and RBIs. If he can really, carry this team into the playoffs, as he, did on Tuesday with a walk-off home run against the White Sox, that's going to be really big for the Indians. I mean, they're in the 7th spot right now in the playoffs, but I would not be shocked. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they won the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if they, upset in the wild card. And honestly, they're probably, and I'm going to get into this. I know I'm kind of, saying a lot of stuff that I will say very soon here, but I will say they're probably one of the most misseeded teams in baseball, mainly because of the division they're in. I mean, you've got the Twins and the White Sox, 2 of the top 5 teams in the AL, and, arguably 2 of the top, 5 or 6 teams in baseball. So when you've got them in the same division, and not to mention the Indians, had a really tough time against the Chicago Cubs this year, they've taken on some very, very tough teams. I mean, they probably arguably had one of the toughest schedules in all of baseball this year, and they were still able to have a 31-24 record after that win on Tuesday. But getting into the game on Tuesday, the Indians scored the first run of the game in the bottom of the 1st, and then the White Sox were able to tack on 1 run in the top of the 6th. But then things went into the extras 1-1, and the White Sox were able to put on 2 runs in the top of the 10th. So that made it 3-1 going into the bottom of the 10th inning, a 2-run deficit in the bottom half of an extra inning. That is always the hardest thing to come back from if you are any home team. And the Cleveland Indians show that they are, again, one of the more formidable opponents in this MLB, in all of baseball. And they scored 4 runs in the bottom of the 10th, and they were able to win 5-3 ultimately. White Sox are 34-21. Again, no worries there for the White Sox because I think they're going to cruise right on into the second round of the playoffs after the wild card. I think that we're going to see, a White Sox team we haven't seen in many years. And this could be a White Sox team that makes a ton of noise. I mean, they might even go further than after the first round and after the second round. They might make it to the championship series. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I genuinely believe this White Sox team is going to make a lot of noise in October. So next game, Yankees-Blue Jays. Yankees put on an absolute whooping of the Blue Jays. 12-1 was the final there. Yankees scored 2 runs in the top of the first and then 1 in the top of the fourth. Toronto scored their lone run in the bottom of the fourth, but then 4 runs in the fifth, 3 in the eighth, and 2 in the ninth. I mean, the Yankees were just tacking on insurance runs at the end like it was nobody's business. Garrett Cole struck out 7 Blue Jays. He's back to his normal self. I know, a couple weeks ago, he'd been really struggling pitching-wise in terms of getting those strikeout numbers up. I mean, he's floating around 90 right now. If not, he's already surpassed that number. So, again, Garrett Cole, back to his normal self. He's going to be the front runner of this rotation going into the playoffs. And, a couple weeks ago, when the Yankees hit 500, they were 21-21 or whatever it might have been. All of a sudden, they're 32-23. And a lot of people were saying, in the baseball community, the sports community, should the Yankees be worried? The Yankees are 500 for the first time all year. Is this Yankees team going to make any sort of noise in the playoffs? Are they going to have any sort of impact in the postseason? Well, they've shown why they're going to have that, and they've shown why people should not discount them. 32-23, that's an impressive record. Blue Jays moved to 28-27. Gio Urshela also had a really big game. Good to have him back in the lineup for the Yankees. 4-hit game out of him. Garrett Cole picking up the win. 7-3 on the year. 2.84 ERA. While Tanner Roark for the Blue Jays got the loss, 2-3 on the year, a 7.01 ERA. And Tanner Roark, I mean, he pitched okay. I watched bits and pieces of the game. I was at a friend's house briefly and, watched a couple innings of the game. He was okay. I mean, he definitely, his off-speed stuff was working very well. I mean, he had a couple incredible breaking balls that sat right in the zone, but he's not the typical Tanner Roark of a couple years ago when he was with the Nationals, which I think, was probably some of the better baseball in his entire career. But we'll see with him and, Hyun-Jin Ryu and Robbie Ray, what kind of, performance that pitching rotation will put on in the playoffs. They're going to be an interesting team to watch. I mean, they're an 8th seed. I think they could make some noise, but again, I just don't know if they have all of the firepower that they need to move past the wild card round. Next game, Cubs-Pirates. Pirates picking up a surprising walk-off win in 9 innings. I mean, again, this is only a 9-inning game, but in the bottom of the ninth, they won it. 3-2, they beat the Cubs. No run scored in the first inning. Pittsburgh put on the first run in the bottom of the second, and then put on another run in the bottom of the fifth. But the Cubs put on 2 runs in the top of the eighth. And again, for other teams out there that are going to potentially face off against the Cubs in the playoffs, that should be a concern right there. If your bullpen cannot hold the Cubs, they will put on runs that they need to put on in later innings. And they have no problem. They've got guys that are clutch. They've got guys that have been, in this type of, situation before. They've got a lot of the same guys from their 2016 World Series team. So this team knows how to win. This team knows how to play in, the postseason. They know how to play in October. And right there, that's a sign, hey, if we need 2 runs, we need to push this into extras, or we need to at least give ourselves a chance, we're capable of doing that. Jacob Stalling hitting the walk-off home run. Steven Brault actually pitched a very good game for the Pirates, but it was Richard Rodriguez that picked up the win for the Pirates. 3-2 on the year, 2.82 ERA. Anthony Rizzo hitting a game-tying home run, and again, he's one of the guys that if you are playing the Cubs in the playoffs at any point of the time, the wild card, the NLDS, the NLCS, whenever, he's a guy that you should be very, very frightened of, especially at the plate, because you never know what's going to happen with Anthony Rizzo, and he's a very clutch hitter, and he's somebody that can get the job done at the right time and at the right moment, at the most important moment as well. I mean, he's come up big for them in many, many playoff instances in the last couple of years, really. I mean, he was instrumental in their World Series run, and having him and Baez, and if they can get Contreras hitting how he normally is hitting. I mean, Jason Hayward is leading their team in hitting, and that's actually, again, if he's leading their team in hitting, yeah, you could look at that saying that's not a great sign if he's the guy leading the team in hitting, but you could also say, hey, if you know that Baez is going to produce, if you know that Contreras is going to produce and Rizzo is going to produce, you can take the hit of having Hayward being your main, leader in batting average, because again, that's just an added person to have that is going to be productive from the plate and could potentially either get on base or score runs. And this Cubs team, I think they're going to be, a team that they haven't been talked about much, and I think they're going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs. Next game, Rays-Mets. Mets winning 5-2 over Tampa Bay. Pete Alonso hitting a huge solo home run. Both teams scoring 1 run in the second inning, and then the Mets tacked on 1 in the bottom of the fourth, 1 in the bottom of the sixth. Both teams scored 1 run in the 7th, and then 1 more run was scored in the 8th by the Mets. Again, the Mets are completely out of it. They're 25-30. Well, I guess not completely out of it, but they would probably have to win out the rest of the year, and they would have to need probably about 2 or 3 teams to completely collapse and crumble in the last couple games, which I really don't see that happening. Robinson Cano also having a solo home run. Seth Lugo, I mean, he picked up the win. Great win for him on the mound for the Mets. Struck out 7 in 6 1/3 innings. He's 3-3 on the year with a 3.82 ERA. Blake Snell picking up the loss. He's 4-2 with a 3.24 ERA. But hey, Blake Snell, again, he's one of the top pitchers in the AL when he's at his best. And going into this playoffs, right now sitting at the 1 seed, this Rays team is no joke. They should not be messed with. I think that they could be, a really, really dominant team, and I think that I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I know that they're a 1 seed, and I think everybody assumed that this year might be, the Yankees or whomever, but the Rays have stepped right into that new role, and I think that they're going to really, play up to their potential. I genuinely do. I have a lot of belief in the Tampa Bay Rays. Next game, Braves and Marlins. Marlins absolutely getting crushed by the Braves, 11-1. Atlanta scoring 2 runs in the first inning, or excuse me, 1 run in the first and 1 run in the second. So scored the first 2 runs of the game. Then they tacked on 2 more in the bottom of the 5th. Miami scored 1 in the top of the 6th, and then Atlanta put up a 5-run bottom 7th frame to go along with 2 runs in the bottom of the 8th. Again, this high-powered offense, they clinched the NL East actually on Tuesday as well, which is, a huge, huge thing for them. Marcell Ozuna had a ginormous game from the plate, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. This guy has been unbelievable all year long for the Braves, and he's not to mention, he's been one of the guys that has benefited greatly from the universal DH. And, good. I'm really happy for him, because I always felt when he was with the Cardinals, in previous years, and when he was with the Marlins, he was great with the Marlins. I mean, he was an all-star with the Marlins. And everybody knew what they were getting when he came to St. Louis, because he's a power hitter. He's got a great bat. He's got a great swing. He's just not a very good fielder. He's not a great fielder. And now that the DH is universal, he could potentially be a guy that, we see being one of the leaders in hitting here on out, moving forward in the MLB. I mean, this could really change the entire trajectory of his career, because before this, I mean, he was hitting, 250, 260, being in the field all the time. Now he can rest. Now he can, put his feet up a little bit and not have to worry about going in the field and just focus on hitting. And it's going to amplify how good of a player he is, because I genuinely think that he's a very, very good hitter, and he's showing it this year. So a really great win by the Atlanta Braves, clinching the NL East. Congratulations to them. Another team that has punched their ticket to the bubble this year for the playoffs. Next game, Orioles, Red Sox, and this was just a battle of the bottom barrel teams in the AL East. Orioles have completely fallen by the wayside, and it kind of, disappoints me, I guess, a little bit to say that, because I was very, very high on the Orioles, a couple weeks ago or so. I was I was a big believer in them. I said, hey, you know what? They could actually make a little run. They've got a great team. This might not be their year, but honestly, you give them at least 2 years, and maybe not even 2 years, and they're going to be right back in an even better position for the playoffs. I mean, I think this Orioles team is going to be making a lot of noise in the coming years. But the Red Sox picking up the win 8-3. Baltimore scoring the first run in the first inning, and then Boston putting on 3 runs in the bottom of the second, and then 1 in the bottom of the third. They put on 4 runs in the bottom of the 6th. Baltimore only tacked on 2 more in the top of the 6th, and that was all she wrote for the Orioles. Baltimore moves to 23-32, while the Red Sox are 21-34. So again, 2 of the worst teams in the AL East, and really 2 of the worst teams in probably the entire AL. But again, just like the Orioles, I think this Red Sox team is kind of preparing themselves for the years to come, and we might start seeing them back at the top of the AL East in, sooner rather than later. So moving into the next game, final in 10 innings, Tigers and Twins. Twins winning this one 5-4. And again, this was a game that they needed to win. If they want to keep on, that solid, 4 spot that they're at right now in the playoffs, they can't drop games to, a 22-31 Tigers team. The Twins, again, scoreless, the Minnesota Twins scored the first run in the bottom of the first. Both teams put on a run in the fourth, and then Detroit actually went ahead and scored one run in the sixth, one run in the seventh, so it's 3-2 going into the eighth, and then the Twins are able to put on a run in the bottom of the eighth, and that was able to force it into extra innings. No runs scored in the ninth. The 10th, though, Detroit put on one run, so they put on the pressure a little bit, but Minnesota, they were able to rally and win in the 10th inning. A huge, huge win for them. I will say for the Tigers, and he's been a really, really nice surprise for them, Heimer Candelario, he has been unbelievable for them all year long, hitting above 300. He's got about 12 home runs on the year, somewhere around there, 30-plus RBI guy. I mean, he's going to be a player that I think, as Miguel Cabrera starts to phase out and kind of age out of baseball, he's going to slide right on in to that, role that Miguel Cabrera. I'm not saying that he's going to be Miguel Cabrera. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he's going to potentially have that new role of being a big power hitter in this lineup. They've got Jonathan Scoop. If they can keep him around, I think he's been playing really good, and he's picked up the slack with Jacoby Jones going out. But Jones, I think when he returns from an injury and when he, gets back to full health and, coming next year, I think that Jacoby Jones, Jonathan Scoop, and Heimer Candelario, they're going to be, guys that are going to make a lot of noise in the AL Central. I think they're going to be a team to watch for sure. But the Twins moving to 34-22, picking up a really, really big win. Max Kepler actually hit the game-tying home run in the eighth. So Max Kepler, he hasn't been hitting great this year, but he's going to be a guy that I think could come up clutch for the Twins at some point or another. And right now, I'm going to get into it in the next segment, but, in a little bit, right now they're sitting at the fourth spot. They could potentially play the Yankees, who are fifth. And that's a rematch from last year's AL playoffs. So who knows? The Twins could come into that with some, vengeance, and they want their revenge. They want, they want a fair shake from last year, and they're going to be coming, full steam ahead if they're playing the Yankees, or really whomever they play. Next game, Cardinals-Royals. Cardinals winning 5-0. Again, another team that is right on the fringe of making the playoffs. So these wins, they are much needed, and they can't, drop these games against a 22-33 Royals team, just like how the Twins can't drop one against the Tigers, right? So the Cardinals winning 5-0, put up 3 runs in the top of the second, 1 in the fifth, 1 in the sixth, and that was it. They shut out the Royals. A really, really good win. Dylan Carson actually had a 3-hit game, so he was, very, very instrumental as well. Harrison Bader had a really nice play out in the outfield, and although his bat's been struggling mightily this year, Harrison Bader, Tyler O'Neill, great fielders. I mean, they're going to be guys that I think are going to do a really, really nice job out in the field, especially Bader. I mean, he's a very, very fast outfielder. He covers a lot of ground, and, if they're able to solidify their spot in the playoffs, this Cardinals team, I don't want to say that they're going to make any sort of upset, but they're definitely going to be a team to watch potentially. Again, I'm going to get into in the next segment, but I think that they could maybe pull off an upset because they know how to win. They're a winning ball club. They're a winning organization. They're a historic, and a storied organization. So who knows? But I think that, if they are able to finish out the year that they want to finish out and have a strong finish, I think that they can carry that into the playoffs because, again, this is a team that, again, they don't look super glamorous on paper with the numbers and the hitters that they have, although Paul Goldschmidt's been hitting very well this year. Still, I mean, they've got a lot of potential, and they know how to win, and they've proved it in the 2010s and the 2000s. So this is a very, very good Cardinals team nonetheless. Next game, Angels-Padres. Angels winning 4-2. Padres dropping this one. Again, a game that you don't want to drop if you're the Padres, but that's not going to really change anything. Already in the playoffs, their spot's already been solidified. But 1 run scored in the first by San Diego to get things started. Then the Angels tacked on 1 run in the second, then 2 in the sixth, 1 in the eighth. San Diego was able to put up 1 more in the eighth, and that was it. Again, Angels moved to 25-31. Padres 34-21. So again, the Padres are a force to be reckoned with. I mean, I think that they are one of the scariest teams in baseball, and I think once we get into the playoffs, this team, like the White Sox, I think, they are the NL version of the White Sox, in my opinion. I think the White Sox and the Padres are 2 very comparable teams, and honestly, I would not be shocked, and this would be a very, very interesting World Series, but I could see them being in the World Series. I would not be. I mean, they're again two very evenly matched up teams, and unfortunately they aren't in the same league, because that would be an incredible series to watch. But hopefully they're able to find their ways out of their respective leagues and respective playoff brackets, and maybe we'll see an interesting World Series this year. Who knows? Next game, Astros Mariners. Astros winning 6-1. Again, every single win counts for this Astros team. I mean, they're hanging on for dear life. I mean, they are still in the playoffs. They still got a good spot, but in terms of moving into the playoffs, they want to go in with as much momentum as possible. And if they were to drop, 2 of 3 or, get swept, I mean, obviously they won't. But if they were to, lose a majority of the remaining games, especially when they're playing against the Mariners, this one of these last series, that won't be a good momentum carrier into the playoffs for this team, especially with the season that they've had, especially with the off-season allegations. And it's going to be interesting to see how that, whole scandal in the off-season plays, any sort of role in their performance in the playoffs this year, and if they're going to be exposed. I mean, they've kind of been exposed this year. They're 28-27, vastly different team from a year ago. So it's clear that there's been some difference in their, not only their entire team, but their performance as well, with the lack of, sign stealing that they're able to do now. So it's going to be a very intriguing to see if they're able to have any sort of, revival of themselves in the playoffs. But again, Astros 28-27, Mariners 24-31. Next game, Rangers D-backs. D-backs winning 7-0, blanking the Rangers. Really great game out of the Diamondbacks. Carson Kelly had a 3-run homer. Nick Ahmed had an RBI triple. This Diamondbacks team, I mean, they're preparing themselves, I think, for, the future. I don't want to say not too dissimilar from the Red Sox, because the Red Sox are just a completely different, organization as a whole. I think they're a very winning, storied team, like, the Cardinals are. But the Diamondbacks, not too dissimilar in the sense of, what they have to offer. Again, 21-34 right now, but at the same time, they've got pieces that they can build for the future. They did get rid of Starling Marte, but if they can keep building around Ketel Marte, and if they can keep him around for as long as possible, I think that they're going to be just fine. They picked up, I can't remember his name, but he was a really highly touted pitching prospect in one of those trades. So that could be very, crucial for them. I think they got him from the Blue Jays when they got rid of Robbie Ray. And I actually think that really benefited their overall rotation. And I'm going to be very curious to see, moving forward in the future, how Zach Gallen performs in a Diamondbacks uniform and, what kind of impact he'll have on this team. I think he's going to be a very, very good pitcher in the NL and really the entire league. He might be a name that we hear much more often moving forward and in the future. Next two games, last two games of the evening. First one, Dodgers and Athletics. Dodgers winning 7-2. Battle of the, West Division leaders. And right there, the Dodgers showing their clear separation between them and the Athletics. Both teams scored 1 run in the first. Oakland tacked on 1 in the top of the third. But then the Dodgers scored 2 in the third, 2 in the fourth, 1 in the fifth, and 1 in the seventh. I mean, they really piled in the runs. Again, Athletics moving to 33-21, while the Dodgers are 39-16. This Dodgers team is unbelievable. They will probably get to 40 wins. And I did not think that many teams were going to get to 40 wins, and we're not going to see many. But I'm not shocked that the Dodgers are one of those teams. I mean, they have one of the best, if not the best, lineups in the entire league. I mean, they are from top to bottom, 1 through 9, they've got guys that can do damage at some point or another, whether it's their, first 3 guys, their 4, 5, 6 hole hitters, or their bottom 7, 8, 9 hitters. They've got a lot of versatility throughout the entire lineup, not to mention they've got great pitching. And the last game of the evening, Rockies, Giants winning 5-2. Giants are trying to do everything they can for those playoffs and really try and, hopefully find themselves in the playoffs in some sort of fashion. But again, I just don't think with how the Reds have been playing, with how the Brewers have been playing, I don't see the Giants really fitting into, that situation. But we will have to see. Again, when this comes out on Saturday, you all will know more, and we will all know more about what is going on with the playoffs as the season continues to, wind down. But moving into the playoffs, we're going to have some really, really good matchups. So that'll do it for us in this first segment. But stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I'm going to keep the ball rolling with this playoff talk, and I'm going to dive into a playoff preview for the postseason this fall and discuss some things I think people should keep an eye on, some teams to watch, and much more. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Reidnar with you all, and in our first segment, I got into game recaps from Tuesday, September 22nd, and gave some standing updates as well. Some teams have started to, punch their ticket for the playoffs, and things are starting to get, shored up for October more and more each and every day. Be sure to stick around for the final few minutes of the show today, as I will dive into the role that technology has had on baseball so far, and what the impact will be in the future if more and more technology approaches, are utilized by the MLB. I want to now dive into a playoff preview for this upcoming postseason, with it being right around the corner, and a lot of teams are starting to solidify their spots in the bracket. I want to go through each matchup and say whether or not it's a series to watch for this upcoming playoffs, who might be the winners in the first wildcard rounds of the 2020 postseason, and a lot more. And again, like I mentioned in the first segment, this is being recorded on Wednesday, September 23rd. So this is all as of Wednesday. So by the time you all hear this, probably going to be a very different, maybe there's some some similarities in the playoff matchups, but this is as of right now, September 23rd on Wednesday. First one, Dodgers versus Brewers. As of right now, Dodgers are first, with the Brewers sitting at 8th. Brewers are slowly making their way into the playoffs. I mean, similar to the last 2 years, last year they had a miraculous late season turnaround, able to push their way into the wild card, unfortunately losing in the wild card round to the Nationals. But then the year before that, they forced, a game-tying game 163 against the Cubs to win the NL Central at Wrigley Field. I mean, it's a game that I remember racing home from class when I was still in college, and I cleared my entire day because I knew that I needed to watch the Brewers and see if they were going to actually pull it off, and they did. That was pretty impressive. And right now, they're doing the same thing that they've done the last 2 years. They've caught fire right at the right time, and they've had some help with other teams losing. I mean, having the Phillies drop 2 straight against the Nationals, the Brewers beating the Reds, that's always huge as well. However, this is the Dodgers that we have to remember, and they are still one of the best, if not the best teams in baseball. With the lineup they possess, it's going to be a lot of relying on the pitching from Milwaukee, which I don't know if that will add up to them, winning any games against the Dodgers, because the hitting is that tremendous. I will say Corbin Burns has, rapidly made his case for being a potential Cy Young winner, and at the very minimum, a candidate in the NL. I mean, he's been pitching lights out for the Brewers. He's pretty much taken the reins as the ace of that Milwaukee team over Brandon Woodruff. He's still been pitching very well this year. But again, after that, Josh Lindblom has not been pitching great, and the pitching really starts to die down a little bit. They've got good, solid relief pitching, and they've got Josh Hader, who's their closer. But again, this Dodgers team, it's heavy. It's really heavy. With Will Smith, he's been batting .297. He's got a .582 slugging percentage. He's got a .420 OBP, and he's got a 1.002 OPS. Corey Seager doing the same thing, batting .311. He's got a .952 OPS. Mookie Betts has been playing unbelievable all year long. His first year with the Dodgers, batting .303. He's got a .973 OPS. Really, right now, those are their 3 main guys in their lineup. They obviously have Muncy, who's going to add, he's going to help out, and, no question about that. Justin Turner, A.J. Pollock, they've all been hitting very well. They've got 7 of their 9 first batters in their usual lineup that have 20-plus RBIs, and Betts and Seager are very close to 40. So, again, right there, you don't really need to unpack that much, because that tells you this team produces runs. There doesn't seem, there hasn't been any slowing down for the Dodgers either. They've, winners of of 5 of their last 6, finished with a very easy series against the Angels, but this is a scenario that looks all too familiar in sports. The 1 seed going into the playoffs against the 8 seed, no home field advantage really, no home crowd to play in front of. Could this spell an upset for the Dodgers? Could this spell trouble for them? I really could see, either it's the Dodgers or the Rays being, a potential, being upsetted in the first round, mainly because, again, there's no crowds. We have to remember that plays a big factor into teams' performances. With no fans, How is that going to go? Also, are the Dodgers going to go into the playoffs too nonchalant, too relaxed? Hey, we know that we're the 1 seed right now in the NL. We know that everybody talks about us. We've got the best team, this, that, and the other. Can they go into this playoffs with the correct mindset that will not allow them to be upset in the first round? That's going to be my biggest thing to see and to really watch how they carry themselves as a team, because this Brewers team, I mean, they have no problem taking down, this is, again, a kind of a David versus Goliath battle, and they have no problem taking down, the main leader up on the totem pole. I mean, the Dodgers are that good, but the Brewers are also a sneaky team that could, take them down if they, let their foot off the gas pedal for one moment. I mean, the hitting has struggled this year for the Brewers. Yelich has not gotten anything to go from the plate. Braun leads their team in hitting with a .255 average, and not to mention two of their, pickups in the offseason, Omar Narvaez and Eric Sogard, both hitting under 200 and, both having under 600 OPS. I mean, again, you'd have to probably reevaluate something there and try and fix it. And, as Sogard being one of their supporting role guys, middle infield player, shortstop, second baseman, and Narvaez being their catcher, you can't have that in your lineup. You can't have those holes in your lineup, especially if you're taking on the Dodgers. Ryan Braun, again, he's been hitting better. He is second on the team with 25 RBIs, and they, have one of the lowest strikeout numbers in the lineup. And coincidentally enough, it's, the second fewest strikeouts in the first 9 behind Eric Sogard, shockingly enough. I can't believe I'm saying that because Sogard has been hitting terrible this year. But again, Ryan Braun, the fact that he's kind of the leader of this team, he's a veteran, he's been around the block a couple times. Yes, he's had a lot of, issues in the past, so on and so forth. But at the same time, he's been in these positions before. He's been on this team for many, many years. He's, somebody that is very familiar in this situation and could really, really help them out in the long run. Jed Jerko, I have to say, he has woken up, and he has woken up at the right time. He's hitting .274. He's had some huge hits the last few games. He's been huge for the Brew Crew. I mean, and again, not just Jerko, but a trade deadline pickup, Daniel Vogelbach. He's been a ginormous addition. Ever since coming to Milwaukee, he's batted .410, and he's collected, 10 hits in those 12 games. So 10 of the 12 games, he's getting a hit. He's getting on base. He's batting .410, and he's only played with them, not even half the year. So again, this is a team that, although, on paper they don't look, super glamorous, I will say they've got good pieces. They've got the right, kind of additions that they've needed to make in the, not just in, the trade deadline, but also in the offseason, although Justin Smoke was eventually dropped by, and he was released by the Milwaukee Brewers, and he was one of their offseason pickups, and, I mean, he played horrendously, but they replaced him with Daniel Vogelbach, and he's been a ginormous addition. With Jerko and Vogelbach providing that needed assistance and really needed help, especially at the plate, they could be a sneaky team that might get lucky forcing a Game 3. And, who knows, maybe they bounce back from their disastrous finish last season in the wild card and actually beat the Dodgers. But my prediction for this one, Dodgers win, maybe a 2-0 decider. I wouldn't be shocked if the Brewers stole one from L.A., but again, I think that the Dodgers are going to win it ultimately. Next one in the NL, Cardinals, Padres. Cardinals are the 5 seed. Padres are the 4 seed as of right now. I honestly don't see a whole lot of hope for the Cardinals in this one. I really don't, which is very unusual to say about them. I know I had mentioned that this is a team in the first segment, that this is a team that is, very storied. They know how to win. They're a well-ran organization. They're a well-managed team, and they've got guys that are not only, young and up and coming, but they've got seasoned guys that have, like on the Brewers with Ryan Braun, they've got a couple more of those types of players that have been on this team for many years and that have been in these playoff positions and playoff situations before. Padres, they don't have those guys that, have experience in the playoffs at all. But at the same time, San Diego's got some of the best hitters, some of the best players in the NL. I mean, Fernando Tatis, right there, that tells you a whole lot. And then you got Manny Machado, you've got Cronenworth, you've got Will Myers, Trent Grisham's been a big help, and the list goes on. Then you've got the pitching, you've got Trevor Rosenthal, you've got Mike Clevenger, you've got, Zach Davies. I mean, this team is loaded. And in all honesty, you could argue that this team might be the deepest team, both pitching and hitting-wise, both, in the entire league. You could really make an argument for that against, the Yankees, against the Dodgers. I mean, the White Sox, like I mentioned in the first segment, they are two very similar teams, the White Sox and the Padres. So it's going to be very interesting to see how those two teams kind of fare in this playoffs. The hitting, like I said, absolutely insane on the Padres' end. They're 3-4-5 hole hitters driving in 20 or more runs each this year with Jake Cronenworth, Fernando Tatis, and Manny Machado. They've all, they've also recently, and they've also received the entire year a lot of help from the bottom of their lineup. Will Myers hitting, in that between those 7 and 9 holes in the lineup. 298 on the year, a 624 slugging percentage, a 989 OPS. When you've got a guy that is driving in that, that high of a power hitting production from the plate, I mean, a 624 slugging percentage, that's insane. And he's your 8-hole hitter, your 7-hole hitter. I mean, again, no pitcher is safe at any point of the lineup, no matter where it is. No matter if it's the first guy, the 5th guy, or the 7th guy, they all can do the same damage. Mitch Moreland and Austin Nola have not been great since they've arrived in San Diego, but at the same time, the playoffs, I mean, that's kind of a whole different season. And so they can kind of wipe out the last part of the year, maybe, start fresh. And, Mitch Moreland is a great hitter. I mean, he's proved it this year. He is kind of getting old, but he has proved that he's still got a lot of life in him. And Austin Nola, I think, is a huge asset for them, too. So I think that they're going to be just fine. And again, the pitching is just as good. Dinelson Lamet, I genuinely think that he's going to be one of the top contenders for the Cy Young this year. He's got a 2.07 ERA. He's 3-1 with 89 Ks. Zach Davies, I mean, he's kind of been their number 2 guy in the rotation. 2.69 ERA. He's 7-3, 55 Ks. Again, they're both kind of the leaders in this rotation. Drew Pomeranz has been lights out in the bullpen, and not to mention Trevor Rosenthal. I mean, again, another guy that, I mean, he's virtually been unhittable. He has not given up one run since he's come to San Diego, and he's appeared in, 8 to 10 innings so far for, San Diego. And the fact that he has yet to surrender any offense at all, I mean, this is a team, again, that even when, the opposing team might put up 2 or 3 runs against their starting pitchers, if the offense turns things around and then the relief comes in, it's going to probably not go in favor of the opponent. They're probably not going to have any chance of coming back. I don't want to assume that, but with how good this relief pitching is and how they can come in and get the job done, I mean, they're very reliable. And having a reliable bullpen in October is always crucial because there's just like this whole entire year, there's very small room for error. And in the playoffs, there's even a smaller margin for error. So having a very productive and reliable bullpen is crucial. St. Louis, I mean, they've been in the middle of the road for most of the year. Paul Goldschmidt has been quietly continuing to show how he's one of the best, hitting first basemen in the league. But outside of him, they don't have a whole lot of help. I mean, Matt Carpenter, Tyler O'Neill are hitting below 200. Colton Wong and Paul DeJong have both sub 700 OPS. And for your 3 and 4 hitters to have those type of power numbers, below 700 OPS, that's not great. That is not a good sign. The pitching has been fairly good, though. I have to say it's been pretty solid. Adam Wainwright, the veteran, still getting it done. He's 5-2 with the 3.05 ERA. Like the Padres, they have quality pitching, but the separating factor is the hitting. And the Padres just have much more of it than the Cardinals do. I mean, there's no question about it. So my prediction for this one, Padres win. Padres win this one. Cardinals maybe take a game, but ultimately the Padres are going to move on. I mean, it's going to be, if the Padres and the Dodgers are able to meet up in the NLDS, that is going to be the must-watch series for probably the entire playoffs, in my opinion. Next series, Reds, Braves. Reds are the 7th seed. Braves are the 2 seed. Reds are the hottest team in baseball right now. I mean, over the last 2 weeks, they've gone 10-4. They've pulled themselves into the playoff picture, and they could do a lot of damage. I mean, this is a dangerous team that's heating up at the right time. And again, just like, the Brewers, they could sniff out a potential, upset against the Braves, and they might actually move on out of the wild card. I will say, though, the Braves, and this is kind of basing it off of, historic trend, I guess, if you will. They won the NL East the last 2 years. They won it again this year, but they haven't won a playoff series since 2001. So they are very, very due for a series win, in my opinion. I mean, I think this team they are right there. I mean, every year they lose in the first round of the playoffs, and they have an incredible regular season. It's almost, it's predictable. But I think that this year it's going to be a very different case, mainly because of how well the hitting's been for them. I mean, Freddie Freeman batting .340. He's got a 1.084 OPS. Travis Darnell, who came over from the Rays last year, he's been incredible for them behind the plate and at the plate also. I mean, he's got a 956 OPS, a 559 slugging percentage, hitting .336, and not to mention they both have 30 or more RBIs, and Freeman's actually too shy of 50. He's got 48 right now. And Marcell Ozuna, I know I talked about him in the first segment, but I have to take 30 seconds on Marcell Ozuna because he has risen the ranks for them, batting over 300. He's got a 158 OPS plus, which is third on the team. So again, the fact that that is the third highest OPS plus on the team, that should frighten a lot of teams, especially if you're the Reds or especially if you're anybody that might potentially take them on in the further rounds of the playoffs. That is a power hitting oriented team. I am worried about this team's pitching. I will say their rotation does get a little bit, exposed and has some holes in it. Max Fried being really the main focal point. He's the ace on this team. He's got a 1.96 ERA, perfect 7-0 record, the only undefeated pitcher in the entire MLB still. The only one, Max Fried. He's been playing unbelievable all year long. But after that, the rotation really thins out. I mean, Ian Anderson, their 22-year-old righty, he's got the next best ERA with a 2.36 ERA. But Touki Toussaint has been awful recently. I mean, he's got over an 8 ERA. The relief pitching has been surprisingly pretty good. Also, I will have to say, but I mean, having your third guy or fourth guy in your rotation having over an 8 ERA, you can't have that in the playoffs. You cannot have that. You can't have anybody that is going to allow for that much offensive production against your team in any sort of fashion. Mark Melancon, he's been playing great in the closing role for the Braves. He's got a 2.18 ERA. He's got 11 saves on the year. Shane Green, also another relief guy for them, sub-3 ERA, 20 Ks in 24 innings of work. I will say, and I know I keep repeating this, but it's something to make note of, and it's something to pay attention to, because a lot of sports, most of sports, it's all about momentum, and it's all about who can turn up the dial at the right time and really, buckle down and focus on the ultimate goal, right? And the Reds have done that. The Reds have woken up in the last 2 weeks. Like I mentioned, 10-4 in their last 14 games, completely turned their season around in a matter of weeks. They finish out with the Twins, who are set to make the playoffs, and they need to keep playing this strong brand of baseball to carry their momentum into the playoffs. So, and I don't see the Twins sitting anybody, in my opinion. I mean, maybe they will, maybe they'll rest some guys, but that's going to be a tough series for the Reds. That's going to be a very, very hard battle for them. So, it's also going to, show, can they go up against, top tier talent in the playoffs? Can they go up against other very good, formidable opponents that are in the playoffs right now? They only have 4 of their 9 starters with 20-plus RBIs, and a lot of their starters are batting sub-250, with Jesse Winker being the only exception there. And again, his average has started to drop also. Although they don't have the greatest power numbers, they have had considerable help from their pitching staff. And again, they probably have some of the best pitching in the NL. They probably have 2 of the best 1-2 punches in the NL with Trevor Bauer and Sonny Gray. Now, Sonny Gray's been out on the 10-day DL, or the 10-day IL, but Luis Castillo has filled in beautifully for the Reds. He's got a 2.86 ERA. He's got 85 Ks. Trevor Bauer's got 88 Ks. Sonny Gray's got, at least 50, 60 Ks. So those are 3 really strong rotation guys that are high strikeouts and low run guys. And that is exactly what you want going into this playoffs, and especially going up against a team like the Braves that, they've got a lot of power, they've got a lot of offense. You want to have this really good pitching. So this will be a very intriguing pitcher-batter duel, if you will. I'm excited for this one if it does play out with this, because I think the Reds could potentially, maybe upset the Braves. I think that out of all of the teams in the NL, they have the highest probability of pulling off an upset. I'm taking the Braves in the series. That's my prediction. But again, don't be shocked if the Reds at least win one game, if not move on to the next round. So the last one in the NL before I get into the AL, Marlins and Cubs. And again, not a whole lot to say on this one, because I personally think the Cubs are going to run away with this one. I think the Marlins, they're an appropriate 6-7 seed team, but in all honesty, I think that if this was any other year, I don't think the Marlins would make the playoffs. I think that they've hung on for dear life, for the entire season, I think that they started off great, kind of one of these typical teams that, starts off really good, and then they just fizzle out all of a sudden. They didn't really fizzle out. They definitely plateaued, and I think that they're hitting that plateau right before the playoffs, which is not a great sign. Chicago, they don't have outstanding hitting. They obviously, their team average is very low. It's the 27th, overall team average in the entire MLB, but I will say they are very good against 30-plus win teams. They're 6-4 against the Twins this year, they are a combined 6-4 against the Twins, the Indians, and the White Sox, and they have all made the playoffs, and they are all 30-win teams. So this could be, a great team. Not to mention they're 6-4 against the Reds this season, so that definitely, adds to it. Against their own division opponents that are also potentially in the playoffs. They can play, even though their division is very weak, they can play with the best of them. And actually, at one point, they swept the Indians. They went undefeated against Cleveland the entire year. So they can definitely play against some of the top top teams in the MLB. Their pitching is going to be vital for them. Yu Darvish and Kyle Hendricks really lead the charge for their rotation. I have to say, keep an eye on Darvish. He's going to be a guy that, I'm going to be really watching because he's not had great playoff appearances and great playoff performances the last couple years, and we all know why, because the last two of them were against the Astros, and so those numbers, who knows how believable they can be. But again, they need to have a strong pitching performance. Miami's batting average as a team, 14th in the league, so they definitely have the ability to be, a good power hitting team and just a good overall hitting team. I will say their leading hitter is Miguel Rojas, and he hasn't even played in the full slate of games. He's the only 300-plus hitter and the only 1,000 OPS or higher player in their starting lineup. So this is going to be a battle of really the pitching going up against the Miami Marlins hitting if they really bring any of it. I mean, Brian Anderson's been good for them also, but I think that one thing for Miami that if not this year, something to look forward to in the coming years, their pitching. I think that their pitching is pretty solid. Sixto Sanchez, he's been awesome for them. I mean, 21-year-old, he throws really, really hard, and he's been lights out for them this whole entire season. Sandy Alcantara, he's also been dealing for them. He's having a really, really good year. The bullpen has been exceptional for them. Their relievers have, if any reliever that has pitched in 17 or more games for them has a sub-3 ERA. So every single one of them. Every single pitcher on their staff in their bullpen that has pitched 17 or more innings in relief has a sub-3 ERA. So again, this is a team. Now, we saw against the Pirates, this Cubs team, they can score runs late. And this Marlins team, that's going to really, be a big kind of count on their relief pitching, and if their bullpen can come in and get the job done. So I'm going to be intrigued to see this pitching battle in the relief against the late hitting in the innings of the Cubs. Ultimately, the Cubs will win the series. The Marlins might get lucky with one win, but I think the Cubs are going to win it. So, want to move into the AL now. I'm going to get through, the first couple, matchups, a couple things about them, and then also the predictions. First one, Rays and Jays. Rays are the 1 seed. Jays are the 8 seed. And again, this Rays team, they're unbelievable. I think that they are arguably one of the best teams, if not the best team in baseball, and they don't even have one of the top, offenses overall. That's how good they are. They've just been able to find ways to win. They're 8-2 or something like that against the Yankees this year, so obviously they can get it done against other 30-win teams. But, again, don't discount the Jays. They're only 4 years removed from going to the ALCS where they lost to the Indians in 2016. I will say, again, the Rays are very dominating, but the Jays have had a lot of help this year. Teoscar Hernandez has come up huge for them. And Tampa Bay's hitting is going to be, I think, the biggest thing to watch in the entire playoffs. They're the 20th ranked team batting average, and, they not great, but they've been able to somehow, some way, figure out how to, win ball games. And hopefully they haven't caught the injury bug at the wrong time, because Yandy Diaz, who's their only, 300-plus hitter in the lineup at 307 with an 814 OPS. G-Man Choi and Austin Meadows all are making trips to the IL, so this could pose to be an issue for Tampa because G-Man Choi and Austin Meadows are two very, very, crucial pieces to this Rays' success. Brandon Lowe and Willie Adames have helped out tremendously. They're actually the two of them are two of the three players on this Rays team with a 120 OPS plus or higher, the other one being Yandy Diaz. So, they've filled in the void for any injury, or any injured players this entire season. They've been very consistent. I have to give Brandon Lowe, a lot of credit. I mean, obviously his average has dropped down significantly because earlier in the year he was hitting like 330, 320, but, Willy Adames has also been very, very important for them. So I think that they've got the pieces to potentially win. They don't have any wild superstars per se, but they've got guys that fill roles. They are able to, produce when they need to produce. They are a very, very good team. And not to mention the pitching's been stellar. I mean, they've got the 5th highest team ERA in the league, 2nd highest win total, highest number of saves, and 5th highest strikeouts. So it's no wonder this Rays team has been so good. With dominating pitching, very good fielding, they actually lead the league in putouts as a team also. I think that, they can really make up for the lack of hitting. And they went 8-2 against the Yankees. They're 6-4 over the Jays. So they obviously are able to play against not only other top-tier teams, but other top-tier teams in their league. I will, that's going to be, interesting to see how, if they can carry that same performance that they've had the entire year over the Jays into the playoffs. Jays have been a pleasant surprise, though. I'm going to give them credit. They've struggled, as of late, dropping 6 in a row, against the Yankees and then losing 3 of 4 against the Phillies, but they're still in the playoff picture. Teoscar Hernandez has been unbelievable for them. 32 RBIs, which is a team high, and a team high 16 home runs, 164 OPS plus. If Bo Bichette is able to stay healthy, I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker, because adding his bat back in the lineup, he's the only other 300-plus hitter on the team. I mean, he can flat-out play. He's got a great bat. He's a huge asset for them. But I will say, Lourdes Gurriel has been a ginormous addition for their offense also. And he's really, honestly, picked up the slack with Bichette being in and out of the lineup. He's got, a 130, he's got a higher than 130 OPS plus. He's one of the 4 starters in their lineup with a 130 OPS plus or higher. So clearly they've got heavy hitting in the lineup. They just can't afford to go on, any sort of slide these last few games going into the playoffs, because that could really, hang over their head going into the postseason. They finish out with the Yankees and the Orioles. I think it's going to play a key part in this because, they're going to have to really start to, pick up the momentum here. And the Orioles, they are going to be that team that wants to spoil things. So they're going to try and play their best brand of baseball against the Jays and try and, make sure and let it be known that they are going to be a spoiler team. They're going to try and knock the Jays off of that 2nd spot, 3rd spot in the AL East. I think ultimately this Rays team is going to win. They're too dominant of a team, and the Jays, unfortunately, are going to get bounced out. But nobody that is a Toronto Blue Jays fan should be upset, because moving forward, I think they're going to be just fine. Next game, Yankees-Twins, little rematch of last year's playoffs where the Yankees actually won. And this Twins team, I mean, they're a very power-oriented team, and they've had a lot of help from Nelson Cruz this year across the board. I mean, nobody, other than Nelson Cruz sticks out as a phenomenal hitter on this team, but Jorge Polanco could be a player that does a lot of damage. Same thing with Josh Donaldson. Their power numbers have been pretty solid. Donaldson's power numbers, have been phenomenal in this year. I mean, 894 OPS, a 144 OPS plus. So this Twins team, they've got a lot of pop in their lineup. And they're definitely going to want some revenge on the Yankees, who beat them last year in the playoffs. And like the Braves, the Twins, I mean, again, we were I was kind of comparing the White Sox to the Padres. Same thing with the Braves and the Twins. I feel like they're very comparable teams in the sense of they've got great regular season performances, and then they lose in the first round of the playoffs. Hopefully that doesn't happen for them this year, because I think, in all honesty, if this Yankees team comes into the playoffs with any sort of injuries, it's going to be a problem. I mean, they've been banged up for most of the year. They've been on an absolute tear as of recently, though. So, guys are starting to come back and starting to get healthy. So they're starting to pick up, where they left off earlier in the year, right at the right time. They won 10 in a row earlier in this month with its sweeps against the Orioles and Toronto. And, having Judge and Stanton back in the lineup, hopefully for this playoffs, I mean, that is going to be a scary sight. Not to mention Luke Voigt. I mean, he's been incredible for them this year. He leads the major leagues in home runs. He's the only 20-plus home run hitter in all of baseball, so he's really filled that void. DJ LeMahieu, I mean, he's been his typical self. He's got a 1.032 OPS and 182 OPS plus, and he's one of 5 players on the team with an OPS plus of 130 or higher, which, again, is a staggering and frightening number all at the same time. The Twins pitching, I'm going to give them a lot of credit, because I think that they could be a difference difference maker in this series. Randy Dobnak, Kenta Maeda, and Jose Barrios. They've all been a very big part of this pitching staff and, really have been kind of the driving force, I think, defensively for the Twins. I mean, again, the hitting has kind of been hit or miss, but I think overall, I think that, the pitching is going to be really the big difference maker if they can hold this heavy-hitting Yankees team to minimal runs. I will say the pitching for the Yankees has also been there too. They've got 3 of their 5 rotation guys with a 3.5 or lower ERA this season. And Garrett Cole, I mean, he's been back to his usual self. He's got almost 90 Ks now, if not over 90 Ks. And so that is a sign for this team that, things could get, potentially better moving forward. I mean, Garrett Cole has only gotten better as the season has progressed forward. Stanton, same thing. Judge, same thing. Guys are starting to get better. Guys are starting to get healthy, back in the lineup, and things are starting to improve for them. I'm going to say in this one, the Yankees will win because they've been on a tear recently, but I also see this series going to the 3rd game because the Twins, I think, will make New York work for everything, and ultimately, I think that we're going to have a really good, 4-5 matchup in the AL wildcard. Last 2 series, and then we'll get over into my next segment, talking about which players to watch in the playoffs. This one, number 6 Astros against the number 3 White Sox. I mean, the Astros have found themselves in a very unusual spot. They're usually one of the top seeds in the AL playoffs. This year, not so much. They've definitely been exposed. The White Sox have come to play this year, though. They've been playing very, very well. We can't forget, though, the Astros have been to the last few World Series, so we have to give them the respect, even though they might have cheated. We have to give them a little bit of respect. And I think the White Sox, though, they're looking to dethrone the Astros. They're looking to knock down the Astros and say, hey, we're going to make sure you guys don't move on and advance further. We're the new sheriff in town. Move on out of our way because we're going to keep on chugging along. The power hitting for Chicago has been one of the best in the league. I mean, Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson, and Eloy Jimenez have been unbelievable. Eloy Jimenez has 41 RBIs, while Jose Abreu has 55. Not to mention, Tim Anderson has been hitting well above 300 for the last, half of the season. Nick Madrigal and Adam Engel have been awesome fill-in pieces for them also, both hitting 300 or higher, and they're kind of more of a reserve role off the bench. Pitching-wise, the rotation's been solid across the board for the Sox, and again, like the Padres, they've got a perfect balance of hitting and pitching. Giolito, he's been lights out this year. Dallas Keuchel, I mean, they've really led this staff. Dane Dunning, though, has been very efficient in his 6 starts. I mean, he's been a really nice piece for them, kind of a nice 3rd option to go to in that rotation. The hitting is going to be the main piece of their success, but I think that it's going to be the pitching that is really the difference maker for the White Sox if they really want to advance forward and move forward. The Astros, I mean, they've been up and down all year long, and it's kind of, hard to really follow along with them. What is going on? I mean, Brantley's been up and down. Carlos Carrera's been up and down. I mean, their entire team has bounced around all season long. Their bullpen is a big savior for them. Ryan Presley, I mean, he's been a huge closing piece for them. 12 save, 3.6 ERA, which is, again, the higher end of this bullpen, which is, I mean, that's a good thing. If that's the higher end of the ERAs in their bullpen and in their, consistent bullpen guys, that's a really good sign. Like Blake Taylor, Inoli, Paredes, and Andre Scrub, they all have sub-3 ERAs. This is a team that if they get out to an early lead, they are able to hold their opponents with a strong starting pitching. They've got the relief guys that can come in and get it done. But my biggest thing for the Astros, the inconsistency. I mean, what team's going to show up? What Astros team's going to be there? Who knows? Prediction, though, White Sox all day. Not much to say here on this because I just think that the Astros are old news, and I think the White Sox are kind of the new top dogs in the AL. Last series, Indians, Athletics. Indians are the 7th seed as of right now. Athletics are the 2nd seed. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the Indians might be one of the most misseeded teams in all of baseball. And again, I know they can't really do anything about that. You can't, change that per se. Nobody picked these seeds, but they've had some of the hardest schedules in all of baseball. I mean, they obviously were swept by the Cubs, but they took 5 of 7 against the White Sox, who I just got finished talking about being the top dogs in the AL. So you never know what this team is capable of doing. They definitely can play against other 30-plus win teams. They are capable of that. The A's have not have the A's have not had as tough of a road as the Indians have had. They have not played up against the talent that the Indians have had. So, is that going to be a factor? Will that potentially play into this battle? But the Indians, they've got a lot of power in their lineup. Jose Ramirez, huge walk-off hit against the White Sox to send them to the playoffs. He's got 16, 17 homers. He's got, 40-plus RBIs, clear power hitter of the team. And they also have the 5th highest amount of team walks in the MLB. So they have plenty of guys who can drive those runs in, with 5 of their starting 9 having 20 or more RBIs. They have seen their fair share of struggles, though, against, like I said, the top-tier teams. They went 3-7 against the Twins. They were 0-4 against the Cubs. They were 5-2 against the White Sox. But it'll be interesting to see how they do against another 30-plus win team that they have not faced off against at all this year. They finish out with a 3-game series against the Pirates, which is going to be, pivotal for them, that they don't lose 2 of 3 or get swept, because they do not want to have that hanging over their head going into the playoffs at all. That would be a major, major problem. But I will say, their pitching has been unbelievable. That has been the main attraction this entire year. They're second in the league in both team ERA with 3.23 ERA and in Ks with 562 strikeouts. So, quite frankly, this might be one of the best, if not the best, rotations in all of baseball between Zach Plesac, Shane Bieber, who I think he will win the AL Cy Young, and Carlos Carrasco, and Aaron Saval. They can make up for, the lack of power hitting on this team. That's 4 very solid, very dependable starting pitchers. That's going to be the driving force. Can Jose Ramirez, can Francisco Lindor, carry the weight offensively and are able to kind of pick things up for them? The A's have been one of the most consistent teams all year, though. They've been very consistent, and like I mentioned about the Indians, they've been a little bit up and down. So are we going to see the A's be that continuous, consistent team, or are we going to see this Indians team ratchet it up a little bit higher than they have this entire season, to the point where, they're steamrolling right through the A's? Liam Hendricks has been a big-time piece for their bullpen for the Oakland Athletics. He's literally been untouchable. He's got 32 Ks in 22 innings of pitching, 13 saves, a 1.23 ERA. They've got J.B. Wendelken, and they also have Yusmaro Petit, both with sub-2 ERAs in 18-plus innings of pitching. This A's team, they can be dominant in late innings. They only lost 8 games also in September, so they are riding a big-time momentum wave also into this playoffs. But I will say they just recently lost one on Tuesday to the Dodgers, and who knows how that series will play out. The hitting, that's kind of my biggest concern. And I think that is going to get exposed drastically. Stephen Piscotty is currently leading their team in batting average, 241. He's the only one with a 240-plus average, and not one single player has a 900 OPS, which is very uncharacteristic for this team that has, they've got Marcus Semien, they've got Matt Olson, they've got Matt Chapman, 3 very formidable power-hitting players in this league that are not getting it done this year. So is that going to be exposed, or are they going to turn that around at the right time? Because the pitching is there. The pitching is definitely there. I'm not going to lie, in this has some upset feelings to it. I think that the Indians could definitely win, and I think that they could potentially take this one from the Athletics. I think ultimately, the A's, it'll be a good series, but I'm going to pick the Indians in this one. I think, my one upset pick will be the Indians in this one. Things are going to be insane come mid-October. The wild card rounds are already having some very good potential matchups for them. I'm very, very curious to see, how this is going to play out, especially with no fans, with the bubble-like setup for the playoffs. How is that going to play a factor into all of this? Is that going to affect these teams' plays? Who knows? We'll have to see. So that will close things out here for us in our second segment on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial break, I'm going to get into my players to watch heading into October and which players I think could have huge impacts for their respective teams in the playoffs. Folks, it's been a lot of fun so far, but we got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all here still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and we just finished up talking about a little playoff preview, going through the different matchups of the postseason that would happen if the season were to end today. Again, not completely solidified yet, but a hypothetical situation that could play out if those teams continue playing the way that they've been playing lately. I want to now share my players to watch come playoff time and which players I could see being huge pieces for their respective teams. And there are a lot of players I think that could benefit from benefit their teams and benefit themselves greatly. The first player I want to talk about is Marcell Ozuna. I mean, he's having the best year in his career. He's got a career high in average at 327, an OBP with 402, slugging at 630, and OPS at 1.042. I mean, he's been one of the best hitters all year long in the NL and arguably in the entire league. He's got 53 RBIs. He's got 17 homers. I mean, he's going to be an essential piece for them, especially with, Freeman in past years having to carry most of the load in the playoffs hitting-wise. Having Marcell Ozuna now kind of as another added, asset to their team, along with Acuna and Albies and Swanson, bringing in another major power hitter like Ozuna, that's going to be a big difference maker for them. Now, Ozuna, he's been in the playoffs before with the Cardinals. I mean, he's had some experience, but it's going to be interesting to see, how, he's able to perform for a team that's, one of the top teams in baseball. I mean, he hasn't really been in a position like that all that much in his career. So, will the lack of experience have anything to do with it? I really don't think so, because he's really the secret to this powerful hitting lineup. And he's one of 3 players that boast over a 1,000 OPS and 4 with over a 900 OPS in their lineup. So he's not the only one that's been doing a lot of damage. And he's been one of the biggest benefiters of this universal DH. And I think that I've said this many times in this episode, but if he's able to benefit from this, and if they're able to keep this around and this rule sticks around, I mean, he's going to be a player that we're going to hear so much more about. And honestly, one of the many that we'll probably hear much more about, mainly because of, the allowance that rule has of taking guys out of the field and just allowing them to hit strictly, and that's it. And, having him in the lineup moving forward in the playoffs, that's going to be huge for this Braves team, especially if they want to, move past the first round for the first time and win their first playoff series since 2001. He's only been hitless in 3 games so far in the month of September, so clearly very consistent all year long. And he's been a problem for pitchers from the beginning of the season to now, and the fact that he's continued on and he hasn't, fizzled out, because, we hear a lot of these guys early on in the season, they start off hot, and then all of a sudden, again, they plateau, they fizzle out, kind of like how I mentioned in the last segment about the Marlins and how they were kind of a team that I felt that if there was a normal season, they would not have made the playoffs because they would have fizzled out by now. But I will say, Marcell Ozuna, he is not, one of these players that's plateaued or fizzled out. He's just continued to, ride this wave out the entire season. And if he has a huge postseason, this could be a Braves team that really revives itself as a little bit as an organization, and could potentially, add to this already career year he's having. This could really be a big factor for him. Next players, and I'm bunching these 2 guys together because they are equally as important for their team. Nick Castellanos and Mike Moustakas. I mean, they've got a lot of importance together. Castellanos has the highest OPS on the team of any qualifying hitter with an 814 OPS. He's got 14 homers to go along with 32 RBIs. His average, though, has dropped significantly. I mean, he came out swinging in the first couple weeks. I mean, swinging. He was batting .327. He had well over an 1,000 OPS. He was playing great baseball, and now, it's dropped to .230. And, I mean, the last time that it was really above 300 was mid-September, mid-August, and to now he's dropped from 315 to 230. So he's not been hitting great. And I will say he's been getting hits in 6 of his last 7 games, couple homers. He's been a very vital piece for this team, as we can see. So his playing, I think, is going to really propel this team into, the playoff conversation even more as this season winds down. And, it's going to be kind of the difference, I think. If Nick Castellanos and Mike Moustakas can pick up the bats and be the leaders for this team. He's got a negative WAR on the year, which is never a good sign for one of your better power hitters going into the postseason. But if he can try and continue this solid, level of play into the postseason, they've got sleeper team written all over them. Now, Moustakas, on the other hand, he's also struggled, but he's probably struggled a little bit more than Castellanos has struggled, honestly. But I will say what he's got, and that a lot of other players in this postseason, I don't think they have, is he's got experience winning with mid-market teams in very small windows, and that is exactly what this Reds team is trying to do. He won a World Series with Kansas City. He went to 2 straight World Series with them. He went to the playoffs 2 years in a row with the Brewers, went to the NLCS in 2018 and the wild card in 2019. So he knows how to win on very lackluster, star-oriented teams. He knows how to win on middle-market, middle-of-the-road teams. He's been hitting the best he's hit all year long as of recently, and like Castellanos, picking up the slack when the team needs him the most. Career-wise, not a great hitter in the playoffs, which is not a great sign, but he has the history of winning with a team like Cincinnati. Again, another mid-market team, low payroll team that, doesn't ever get major superstars. So he's going to be a huge part of this team's success, and both players are must-watches for them. If this Reds team is able to find themselves in the playoffs and continue on, the trend of making it into the postseason, Mike Moustakas and Nick Castellanos are both evenly weighted players. I mean, they're on literally the same kind of contract. So they're viewed in the same light, essentially, by this Reds team. They're going to be very, very pivotal for their team's success if they make the playoffs. Next player, Fernando Tatis. 41 RBIs, 15 homers, 931 OPS, and he's 21 years old. There's not many players in this world that are putting up those types of numbers. He's got a 2.4 WAR, and he's been the main piece to this Padres power hitting team. I mean, he's really been the driving force behind it. He's the heart and soul of this team. And he has started to struggle lately. I mean, he's hitting 179 in his last 7 games, and that can't afford to have that happen at this point of the season. I mean, you cannot have that, right? I mean, that is just the last thing that you need as somebody like Tatis, who is such a vital part of their team and such a crucial member of their team, can't have a 179 average as the season is starting to wind down and we get into the playoffs. He can't start fizzling out, can't start plateauing. It would be a letdown if Tatis fizzled out. And I will say, he only played in half the season last. I mean, he did not play in many games last year. He only played in about half the season. So this is really his first full, legitimate season that he's played in the MLB. Is fatigue going to play a factor? Is he physically and mentally going to be prepared to make a World Series run? Who knows? He's never been in this position before. But I will say that he's got the abilities and the capabilities of being, a top-tier player in the entire league for many years to come. And this is, I think, going to be really what puts him up on that, stage, if you will, more so than it already has this year. If his team is able to have a successful playoff run, Tatis is going to rise up, and the limelight's really going to be shown on him because, if they come to the NLCS or even the World Series, he's going to be really the main focal point of that. His September average as a whole is like night and day from his August average. I mean, he's hitting 194 in September as opposed to 313 in August. So very, very different. And if he's able to, pick that up, this Padres team, I mean, I keep saying it, I keep sounding like a broken record, but they are frightening. And if you get him up against a righty, watch out, because he could have a field day against righties. But lefties, he tends to struggle against. So, I mean, he still is able to hit pretty well against them for the most part. There wasn't a huge, drastic change. But I will say, if he's going up against a righty, I mean, that's all she wrote, really. And even with the WAR being down from 4.1 last year to, right under a very solid 2.5, he's still been a huge part of his team, and he's still going to be a crucial member of his team. And I think he's going to be one of the most, talked about players in this postseason, and he's definitely going to be a player to watch come October. Next guy, Luke Voit. I mean, he's bursted onto the scene. He's shown through the in and out absence of Stanton and Judge that he can be a legitimate piece for this team, and he can carry the weight with Stanton and Judge being out. He can carry the load for them, and he can be not only a great power hitter, but a great just overall hitter. I mean, he's hitting .280. He's got 21 home runs. So for someone like Voit, I mean, he's clearly got power, but he's also got a pretty solid average for somebody that's a mainly power-oriented hitter. I mean, that speaks to his overall ability as a hitter, as a general whole. He's the only player with 20-plus home runs right now in the league, and he's got 49 RBIs. So a 20-50 guy going into the playoffs on, one of the top baseball teams in all of MLB. I mean, that is frightening. The slugging percentage is what really sticks out to me. I mean, he's, one of the best 14 hitters to have a 600 slugging percentage or higher. So being one of the top 14 guys in all of baseball to have that statistic, it shows his predominant ability as a hitter is this power game. But again, he can still hit for an average normally. Clearly a career year for him. He's hit, a third of his career home runs this season alone. He's got about 60 or so career home runs. He's hit 20 of them. So this is literally his coming out party this season. He definitely does a better job against righties, but he still has the ability to drive in runs against lefties. And I'm going to be watching how he handles the responsibility of being one of the main drivers to this very deep lineup, especially if there's any injury worry with Stanton Judge. And as we all know, there definitely is a concern of that at really any point of time. And I think he could be a huge impact guy. I mean, he has suffered a little bit of a setback this month. He's only hitting .244 as opposed to .326 in August. But Voit could be a difference maker for this Yankees team making a World Series run. You obviously have Urshela, you obviously have Stanton, you obviously have Judge, and you obviously have LeMahieu. And with Gary Sanchez really struggling, Voit slides right on in and kind of fills that void. So if this Yankees team wants to make a push in the playoffs and make a run for the World Series, keep an eye on Luke Voit because he's going to be a vital piece to that. Next guy, Max Fried. The only, and I mean only, star pitcher for the Braves. His role is so pivotal for this team's success, I can't even explain it. He's fourth in the league in ERA. Fried has yet to lose a game this year. Again, he's the only pitcher that's still undefeated. If he keeps playing like this, I mean, he could make a major case for the Cy Young if he already hasn't. He's not a huge strikeout guy, though, so that is something that I definitely am looking at. Will he be a guy that is moving through innings efficiently, striking guys out? And again, he can probably do it in other ways, ground outs, fly outs. He's getting outs in other ways, but how is he going to handle the strikeout load? And his ERA has dropped considerably throughout the season. I mean, it's gone from 3, at the beginning of the year to all the way to sub-2 right now. So again, he's just gotten better. He's getting better at the right time. And it's all about these guys hitting these trends and hitting their stride at the opportune moment for them. 2.44 ERA plus. It's clear he limits teams to little to no runs, really. And with a team that is already very thin in pitching, it's going to be critical that he doesn't have a bad outing in the playoffs because that could really make or break their playoff opportunity. That could be the difference in them, winning a series or, going a game ahead on a team. His performance is going to be so important to this team. He might be the most important player on his team, more so than Freeman and more so than Ozuna because of the lack of pitching they have. A lot of this weight is going to fall on his shoulders pitching-wise on the mound because they just don't have the added pieces surrounding him. His track record does not bode well for him in the playoffs, though. He's got 9 ERA in 4 games last year in the NLDS. He only pitched in 4 innings, but again, knocked around in each appearance, so that is not a great sign. He's yet to give up a home run this year also. So he's only walked 19 batters out of 218 he's faced, so very efficient, very, very, low offensive run production against other teams. I mean, his production is going to be key, so he's definitely going to be someone that, to keep an eye on and to look at moving forward into this playoffs. Next guy, another pitcher, Yu Darvish. I think Yu Darvish is going to be, like Fried, one of the most important pieces to his team's success. I mean, I think, he's been one of the biggest surprises in the entire NL. I mean, he's coming off a really rough year last year, and he was able to bounce back. He gave up an NL high last year, 33 home runs. He's only given up 5 this year, so a massive turnaround for the Cubs ace. He's got 88 Ks in 11 games. It's clear that Darvish is doing a lot of damage from the mound. I mean, you're averaging 8 Ks per outing. That's a lot of strikeouts. That's a great average to have. And in his last 6 starts, he struck out, 8 or more in 5 of the appearances, with 2 games being double-digit, strikeout evenings. So he clearly is a high strikeout guy, and he's really done a nice job at moving through innings. Another guy that can make a case for the NL Cy Young. I mean, he's 6th in the NL in ERA. He's tied for 4th in Ks. He's tied for 1st in wins, and he's got the 6th highest WHIP in the NL as well. He's going to be part of this really good 1-2 punch for the Cubs with him and Hendricks. And, I mean, with the poor hitting, this pitching is going to really have to take, a brunt of the load, if you will, because, I mean, the hitting can come and go in flashes, but the pitching is going to have to be the constant factor here. He's been injury-prone, and he hasn't pitched well in the last few playoff outings he's appeared in. Again, pitched the last 2 against the Astros, so we don't know, how believable those stats are, how skewed those statistics are, because they cheated, rightfully, and obviously, that's going to probably throw some things off for his numbers, rightfully so. But I think that Yu has reinvented himself, and that this postseason could be where Darvish is revitalized and his career takes a turn for the better. My last player to watch in this postseason, Nelson Cruz. And how could I not mention Nelson Cruz? At 40, he's doing things that guys at 25 to 30 couldn't even imagine doing. 16 bombs, 32 RBIs, a 1.026 OPS. I mean, he's only gone hitless in 4 games this month. He's going to be a joy to watch come October because he's showing no signs of slowing down this season. He's a solid playoff hitter. His team is going to be, they're going to really need him, and I mean really need him. He's clearly been their best hitter, and if guys like Eddie Rosario, Miguel Sano, Max Kepler continue to struggle from the plate, although Max Kepler did come in the clutch for them the other night on Tuesday, it's going to, add to the load of Cruz. And obviously his age has to be a factor and has to be mentioned. But, I mean, he's handled it so well this year, and really being, again, kind of like, Tatis, the driving force. Now, obviously, he does not have the help that Tatis has, but he's really been the driving force behind this team all year long. It's going to be interesting, and I'm very curious to see, how he handles that load, and if there's other guys that will step up and help him out in any way or, fashion. Cruz hits way more homers off righties, but his overall hitting against lefties is much higher. His average is much higher against lefties, but he drives in many more runs against righties. So, I mean, he can get it done from both sides or against both kinds of pitchers. And with him being the centerpiece of this hitting, and if other guys can, try and feed off of his ability from the plate, this is a scary team. I mean, this is a team that I think could make a lot of noise in the playoffs and really make a serious run in the postseason. So those are my players to watch. Those are just a couple guys. I mean, obviously there are a lot of other players to watch in this postseason that I'm very excited to see. For the Padres, Jake Cronenworth, Jose Abreu, just rattling off a couple names right there. Guys that are going to have a very, very important and, pivotal role in their team's success, and, whether or not that they can come out on top and move forward in the postseason. And, some of these teams that are, they're coming in with a really, really, high motor, coming off a great regular season, how are they going to continue this into the postseason? Is fatigue going to set in? Is content going to set in? Are teams going to be all right with, hey, I'm a 2 seed, I don't need to worry about anything? Because, in 2 games, your season can be over right now. So, again, there's no room for error, and there's no time to let your foot up off the gas if you're any of these teams, especially if you're, a 1st through 3 seeded team in either league. You cannot allow yourself to take your foot off the gas. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks for sticking around. As always, stay right there, though, because we'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, where I will get into the conversation of what kind of impact technology has had so far on baseball and what the impact could be moving forward and what that could mean for the sport. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we have one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you, and in the last segment I jumped into which players to watch come playoff time. A lot of guys who could have huge impacts for their respective teams once the postseason hits. And I want to close out today's episode discussing the impact that technology has had on baseball and what it will do, moving forward. And as we know, in recent memory, within the last 20 years or so, baseball has had a lot of additions to it, especially with technology. I mean, technology, in my opinion, I've talked to a lot of friends about this because I've got friends that do various things in sports, and one of my friends, he's actually a baseball coach for a Division II school, and he talks to me a lot about how instrumental, film and cutting clips and, all of these setting up cameras in different angles and different points of the field, how, breaking that down and dissecting that all through technology again, is able to, fine-tune something or tweak something for a pitcher or a hitter or a fielder, whatever it might be. And again, the technology is able to pull out the most minuscule things ever, the most minute details that you would never, ever, ever, ever think of. And just by a fraction of a change, you're able to all of a sudden have a completely different result. You can have a guy that's hitting, 250, you tell him to tweak his batting stance just a little bit because you've watched enough film on him and you've seen how, pitches come in at him at a certain angle, and you see how, his swing kind of carries him through in a certain way when a certain pitch comes through. And you tell him, hey, stand up a little bit more, or, crouch down a little bit more, or bring your hands back, about a half an inch. And all of a sudden, it's gone. The hitter's hitting 250, and he's now all of a sudden hitting 350. 100-point increase. So it's got a lot to do with technology. Technology has had a lot to do with the advancement of baseball. I mean, look at what replay has done. I mean, think of all of the questionable, controversial calls that were called back in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s that never had technology. And we can't go back really and change the outcome of those games through technology. And, nowadays, a totally different ball game, literally a totally different game, because you can go back and say, okay, that home run hit seemed to hook foul. It looked like it might have stayed fair, but I can't really tell, and they signal it a home run, and the team goes to their, monitor, and they look at the replay and say, hey, we don't like that. We need to challenge that. And then all of a sudden, now you can challenge plays through replay. Replay has really dictated the outcome to a lot of games in recent memory, especially in the last couple years. I mean, the amount of challenges that there are with, whether it's a strike or a ball, whether it's a fair ball or a foul ball, I think that it's most important in fair or foul balls. I think that if it's a very close hit down the line, and you can't tell, and the umpire, didn't get out of the way in enough time, couldn't tell, the dirt didn't kick up, and didn't, leave a mark as to where it was fair or foul. I mean, that's very important. That is very, very important. Same thing with whether or not it's a home run or not. Now, I think that what it kind of gets convoluted a little bit and kind of gets muddled is, well, is it a ball or a strike? Is it, this? Is, a guy? Now, I think that next to whether or not it's a fair or foul ball, I think somebody being safe at the plate or safe at a base is very important. And there's been many instances, especially this season and in previous seasons, where calls have been overturned because of instant replay. And I go back to, I can't remember the pitcher's name, and I can't remember the umpire's name, but this was years ago. And it was the Detroit Tigers pitcher that was about to pitch a perfect game, and he ran over at first base, covered the bag, got him out, and he was called safe. And the perfect game was completely ended, all because of that one call. I'll never forget the backlash that umpire received in the coming days. I'm pretty sure he received death threats, actually. It was a really terrible kind of outcome for the umpire, but more so, I mean, the pitcher was completely robbed, and there was no replays back then. Imagine if replay had been a thing. You could go and look at that play, would have totally changed the outcome of that game, how that game is viewed in the history books. I mean, it would have been another perfect game, one of the few in baseball history. And because there was no replay back then, that guy was robbed, unfortunately. And again, replay is a good thing. Replay is a great thing. Now, this is where I think technology is starting to kind of mesh too much with baseball, is this whole idea of robotic umpires. You see a lot in the news nowadays about the MLB wanting to experiment with, potential computerized balls and strikes. you see on TV, you watch a game, and you see the strike zone, the K zone, and that would kind of be the main essence of whether or not it's a ball or a strike, and you'd have a computer that would just spit out whether or not it's a ball or a strike. I personally don't like that, and I've talked to a lot of people in baseball who've also agreed they're not a big fan of that. I think that what that does is it completely throws off the strategic element of pitching. You can't paint an outside corner and hope and pray that, an umpire is going to give you that call. You don't have the luxury of going back and looking at film through replay and seeing what kind of calls an umpire makes. Okay, he really likes calling it low and outside, or he really likes calling it high and tight, whatever it might be, and you as a pitcher can now pitch according to that. And if you know that that umpire is going to be one of your umpires for that game, or if you are looking back at a hitter and you see his barrel percentage, where it's at, where he makes the most contact in the zone, where he makes the least amount of contact in the zone, you can look at that and then pitch accordingly and pitch around those numbers to configure into a way that it's strategic. You can't do that anymore. You have to throw strikes. You have to throw balls. And that is literally, it's going to be very cut and dry. And instead of, that might have been a ball or that might have been a strike, these close calls, the strategic pitching would be thrown out of the window, and you would not have that anymore. And I personally, and again, I think that would really mess with the game of baseball because, like in a lot of these other sports, there's got to be some sort of human presence in it, in my opinion, mainly because, if not, everything is too perfect and runs, almost too smoothly, and then there's games become very, again, robotic. Things, the outcome and the motion and the movement of it and the, carrying out of games, it becomes very, almost like tunnel vision, just very narrow, and it's just, there's no creativity to it. There's no strategy to it. All of that kind of falls by the wayside when you've got robotic umpires or robotic referees that are calling it how it is in the rule book, and that's final. Because every umpire has his own strike zone. Every umpire likes calling it high and outside or low and inside. They have certain tendencies. And if a pitcher knows those tendencies and a pitcher knows the hitting tendencies, it's a walk in the park for the pitcher. But if they don't know that, and if they are unable to, pitch strategically because if it's not in the zone, it's not a strike, they can only hope and pray for, a high swing and miss ratio and really try and go after a guy that's got a high swing and miss percentage as a hitter. But I think that overall, I don't think that'll happen. I really hope it doesn't because I think that could just mess with baseball. And, what would baseball look like? Well, baseball, again, it would be very, just, again, cut and dry. It would just be, okay, that's a ball or that's a strike and that's it. There's no, that was a close call or, any sort of, maybe looking back at a replay, any of that. And I will say, though, although that is kind of a negative thing that technology could bring in baseball, there's a lot of positives. I mean, look at all the statistics that we know about nowadays because of technology. We're able to look at power numbers much differently. We're able to look at, exit velocity much differently, launch angle, spin rate on a pitcher's breaking ball or on a pitcher's two-seamer, whatever it might be. We're able to see that now. There's been a couple inventions in baseball that have been really huge. I mean, the K-vests, it's been a way that teams can, track a player's hitting, gathers hitting efficiency. Basically, they put kind of these little points and these little, electronic electrodes or, whatever you want to call them. And they put them on, I believe it was, the hitter's hands, chest, their hips, and somewhere else. And it basically generates kind of an algorithmic kind of thing saying, okay, this is a hitter's efficiency at this point of the zone, at this point of the zone, where do they make contact on the barrel here, whatever. And then they also have Rhapsodo. Rhapsodo is kind of like this camera that is in the ground that is basically in between home and the mound, and it tracks a pitcher's spin on the ball and the speed and the velocity. They're able to go back and look at that and kind of dissect that, break it down, and then give it back to the pitcher. I mean, a lot of these advancements are helping with scouting of teams. Now MLB scouts that are going and watching a high school kid that is a potentially, really good pitcher or really good hitter, and just at first glance back 25 years ago, if somebody performed well, okay, well, he seems to be really good. I'm not seeing anything differently. Now scouts are probably bringing, cameras to games. They're probably bringing trackers to games, and they're now able to go back, look at that, and then somehow, some way punch numbers into a system and figure out, okay, this guy does well in this situation, but he won't do well in this situation, and our team, really revolves around that, aspect of the game. We're not going to go after him. Or vice versa. Hey, we really like what this kid can bring. His numbers show that he's got the potential for a lot of power, a lot of pop. We're very power-oriented. We're trying to add more power to our lineup. We're going to go after this kid. So it's make or break for some of these prospects also. And not to mention how we scout teams. How do these other MLB teams, go into a 3-game series? Let's say it's the Nationals and the Marlins. And the Nationals are able to now gather a bunch of game clips, a bunch of game film, and sit down and dissect it and look at it and say, okay, this is where guys are hitting well. This is where guys are not hitting well. We need to pitch accordingly. Also, the shift. The shift has been one of the newest additions to baseball defense in the last 10 years, hands down, no question about it. And shifting has also played a huge role in how hitters are. Hitters are now having to really, focus on driving the ball the opposite way of the field. Or if a guy is good at hitting oppo field, now he's got to start pulling the ball. And, you see some of these wild shifts. When I was watching the Dodgers Athletics game on Tuesday, I remember they had a shift that was completely leaving the entire left side of the field open. From the base path from second to third was completely, and I mean completely wide open. Like you could have literally rolled a ball down the third base line and you would have probably walked over to second base. There was that little of people. So it goes to show you right there what that all entails in terms of, the technology, what you can look at, what you can't look at. I mean, it has really, played a huge role in a lot of games and in a lot of, players' development and a lot of teams. And I go back to it again. I mean, imagine in this upcoming playoffs, imagine if we didn't have the instant replay and we didn't have the ability to go look back at plays that are close. What if there's a play at the plate? And a play at the plate that could have gone either way. The umpire called him out, but he was safe. And you look at the replay, and you see, okay, well, yeah, now we see that he was actually safe. We messed that up. We dropped the ball. And I remember when the Tigers pitcher had that perfect game, the umpire came out and said, yes, I got that call wrong. I was really, really wrong. And to him, I am so sorry that I did that to you. I ruined your moment. And, I'm pretty sure that the umpire actually received a lot of, I don't know if it was sanctions or fines or if he was punished by the MLB in some sort of fashion. But there were some sort of ramifications for him because he ultimately made a poor call. There was no way of going back and looking at it and fixing it. There was no way of fixing the error and fixing the mistake. And, now all of a sudden, we don't have that perfect game in the history books. And I think that, technology, it's crucial for how, we look at stats, how the game is played, how scouts look at games and how scouts look at talent. And, I'm curious to see what the future holds for baseball and technology. Where is it going to continue on? Where is it going to go from here? But also, what point is it going to stop? Because I feel like there will be a time that statistics on just a general playing field are going to become so specific and fine detailed that people are going to say, well, what is that statistic? A guy that hits really well on, a spin rate of a fastball at, whatever mile an hour against a righty on a cool evening in September, at home. And it's like, well, I mean, what are you going to, you go on not StatCast, but you go on baseballreference.com. And if you look over at all the statistics they have, that is all in part because of technology in baseball. It is insane. I mean, the equations they come up with for some of these statistics, hits minus first base or singles, hits minus second or doubles, hits minus triples, hits minus home runs, hits minus overall hits or power extra base hits over, overall hits, whatever it might be. There is so many different things about this that can go in so many different ways and in so many different directions. So I'm really curious, and I'm also very excited to see where baseball goes with it, but I hope that they don't start implementing it so much that they can't play baseball without it, in the sense of bringing in, robotic umpires. I think that is where we're going to start having issues, and I think that's where you're going to start seeing people very upset with that, and probably not liking the idea of, a computer-generated ball and strike counter that, again, they don't mess up, they don't miss, but it makes things a little bit more challenging for pitchers. But will it make things easy for hitters? That's my question. Will hitters have an easier way? And is the idea of the robotic umpires trying to go in more of a direction of offensive-driven, trying to force pitchers to throw strikes, and ultimately allowing hitters to get hits and drive in runs, and have these massive offensive production games? Who knows? But I really don't think that robotic umpires, if they do become a thing, I don't think they'll stick around, because at the end of the day, you just need, human being umpires calling those games, sitting behind the plate and having, that kind of input of, I don't want to say human error, but human error and human opinion. And, certain umpires like to call certain strikes and others don't. But if that's taken out, I think, pitching will be very different from that point moving forward. And I think hitting will too. But overall, baseball has completely changed because of technology. And I'm very excited to see, more technological advancements that happen in baseball that could potentially advance the sport. So that'll wrap it up for us here today, folks. Thanks again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. We're always looking for feedback, and we love hearing it from you all. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we'd really appreciate that. We want to keep you all clued in to any updates and content to come on GSMC. Thank you again, everyone, for coming and joining me on the show today. And once again, have a fantastic day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.